The chandelier above her head cost more than most people's houses. Zariah Coleman stood frozen in the center of the Al-Nouri mansion's grand ballroom, her gown catching light like shattered starlight. 200 pairs of eyes locked onto her. Silence swallowed the room whole. Even the string quartet had stopped mid-note. The dress she wore was insured for $2 million. 3 weeks ago, she'd been scrubbing these same marble floors. Samira Al-Nouri's champagne glass trembled in her perfectly manicured hand. Her smile had cracked down the middle like cheap porcelain. The woman who'd invited Zariah to this gala as a joke now looked like she'd swallowed glass. Someone whispered, "Who is she?" Another voice answered, "She looks like royalty." But here's what nobody in that room knew yet. This wasn't about revenge. This was about memory. About a woman who'd forgotten her own reflection until someone dared her to look again. And if you're watching this from your living room, your car, your job break room, tell us in the comments where you're tuning in from. Because what happens next isn't just Zariah's story. It's every person's story who's ever been counted out too soon. The question tonight wasn't whether Zariah belonged in this room. The question was whether this room deserved her. Samira's heels clicked against marble as she crossed the floor. Her jaw was tight. Her eyes were calculating. She opened her mouth to speak, and the entire ballroom leaned forward. But to understand how a housemaid walked into a millionaire's party wearing a museum piece, you need to see what happened 3 weeks earlier, back when Zariah was still invisible, back when humiliation wore a polite smile and spoke in soft tones, back when she was just the help. The imported Italian marble was always cold against Zariah's knees. She scrubbed the entryway floor at 6 in the morning while sunlight cut through floor-to-ceiling windows, painting gold stripes across stone that cost more per square foot than her monthly salary. Her reflection stared back at her from the polished surface. Tired eyes, graying edges in her hair she couldn't afford to touch up. Hands that used to hold rare art catalogs now held industrial cleaning brushes. The Al-Nouri mansion sprawled across 3 acres in Northern Virginia, 14 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a wine cellar that required its own climate control system, chandeliers shipped from Prague, rugs from Persia, furniture that came with authentication certificates. Zariah managed all of it. She coordinated the staff schedule, balanced household accounts down to the penny, arranged flowers, managed deliveries, made sure Samira's life ran smooth as silk while her own unraveled in the basement. That's where she lived. A converted storage suite with concrete walls painted beige, one window at ground level that showed passing feet but never faces, a hot plate, a mini fridge, a twin bed where her 7-year-old son Khalil slept curled against the wall because monsters couldn't get you if you pressed yourself small enough. Upstairs, Samira's heels announced her presence before her voice did. "Zariah." Sharp, pointed, the way you'd call a dog. Zariah stood, knees aching. "Yes, Mrs. Al-Nouri." "The Johnsons are coming for brunch. Make sure the orchids in the sitting room are fresh. And wear the gray uniform, not the black. The black makes you look—" Samira's perfectly lined lips curved. "Severe." 3 guests lingered in the hallway, watching. Samira always did this, corrected her in front of an audience. Small cuts, public reminders of hierarchy. "Of course," Zariah said. "You know," Samira continued, voice dripping honey, "it's remarkable how you manage everything. All that art school education put to good use." She laughed. The guests joined in, polite, uncomfortable. "I always say, we're like family here, aren't we, Zariah?" Family didn't sleep in basements. Family didn't eat after everyone else finished. Family didn't smile through humiliation before lunch. "Yes, ma'am," Zariah said. She swallowed it. The same way she swallowed every backhanded compliment, every dismissive wave, every time Samira introduced her as our dear Zariah who keeps this house running, but never invited her to sit at the table. Zariah had learned to endure. But something was shifting inside her, something she hadn't felt in years, a tightness in her chest that felt less like defeat and more like pressure building. She had learned to endure, but this time would be different. The announcement came during afternoon tea. Samira held court in the sunroom, surrounded by 5 women who matched her aesthetic. Designer athleisure, tasteful jewelry, voices that never got too loud. They discussed charity galas the way other people discussed grocery lists. Casual, transactional, performative. Zariah was refilling water glasses when Samira's voice cut through the chatter. "Oh, Zariah!" Bright, performative, dangerous. "Come here a moment." The room's energy shifted. Zariah knew that tone. It meant entertainment was coming and she was the punchline. She approached the table. Samira smiled wide. "Ladies, our annual gala is in 3 weeks. You know, the one at the estate. And I've been thinking." She paused for effect. "Zariah works so hard, she deserves to see how real elegance looks. Don't you think she should attend as a guest this year?" The women exchanged glances, uncertain smiles. One laughed. "That's very generous, Samira." "I insist," Samira said, eyes locked on Zariah. "You'll come, won't you? It'll be educational. Diplomats, CEOs, real culture." The trap was obvious. A maid among millionaires, a social experiment, a joke wrapped in false generosity. Zariah's heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to decline, to protect herself, to avoid the setup. But then Samira leaned closer, whispered just loud enough for the table to hear, "Just don't embarrass yourself." The women shifted in their seats, eyes dropped to teacups. Zariah felt the heat crawl up her neck, saw herself through their eyes, the help, the charity case, the before picture in someone else's success story. She thought about Khalil, about what he'd seen her become, about the scholarship certificates she'd hidden in a box because looking at them hurt too much, about the woman she used to be before grief turned her into someone who accepted insults with a smile. Her voice came out steady, calm, clear. "I'd be honored to attend." Samira blinked. She'd expected refusal, expected Zariah to know her place. "Wonderful," Samira recovered, smiles stretching too wide. "I'll have someone send you the dress code, black tie, nothing too flashy, of course." The women laughed again, louder this time. Zariah nodded once and returned to the kitchen. Her hands didn't shake until she was alone, until the weight of what she'd just agreed to landed heavy in her chest. She'd walked straight into the trap. Samira thought she'd secured her entertainment for the evening. She had no idea she'd triggered a reckoning. The basement suite felt smaller that night. Zariah sat on the edge of the twin bed, still wearing her gray uniform. Khalil was asleep, one small hand tucked under his cheek. His breathing was the only sound besides the pipes rattling overhead. She'd held it together all day, through brunch service, through Samira's friends stopping by to get another look at the maid who's attending the gala, through the whispered comments she wasn't supposed to hear. Now, alone in the dark, something cracked. The tears came silent, hot, angry. She pressed her palms against her eyes, but they kept coming. Years of swallowed words, deferred dreams, watching her son grow up in a basement because the world didn't pause for single mothers who lost everything. She stood and walked to the tiny bathroom, turned on the light, looked at herself in the mirror above the sink. When had she stopped recognizing her own face? The woman staring back looked exhausted, worn down, nothing like the girl who used to walk into university lecture halls with her head high, nothing like the curatorial fellow who'd published essays in prestigious art journals, nothing like the woman her father had raised to never shrink for small minds.
She pulled off the gray uniform, let it fall to the floor. Underneath, she was still herself, still breathing, still here. On the shelf above the toilet sat a cardboard box. She pulled it down, fingers trembling. Inside were relics from another life, university commendation letters, published articles with her name in print, a photo of her in cap and gown, her father's arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning like they'd won the lottery. His voice echoed in her memory, rough, warm, certain. Never shrink for small minds, baby girl. They'll try to make you smaller so they feel bigger. Don't you ever let them. Zariah pressed the photo to her chest. I'm done hiding, she whispered to the empty room. She replaced everything carefully, turned off the light, climbed back into bed beside her son. But sleep didn't come, because her mind had already started moving, calculating, remembering. There was one person she hadn't called in years.
The phone rang 4 times before a deep voice answered. This is Adisa. Zariah sat in her car in the grocery store parking lot, phone pressed to her ear, heart hammering against her ribs. She'd been staring at his number for 20 minutes before finally dialing. It's Zariah Coleman, she said. I don't know if you remember. The curatorial fellow who wrote that analysis on Yinka Shoni Bare's textile work. His voice warmed. Of course I remember. How are you? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. She told him everything. The engagement that ended in a coffin, the scholarship money that disappeared when grief ate her focus, the house manager position that kept her son fed but slowly erased who she used to be, the invitation that was really humiliation wrapped in silk. Adisa Kincaid listened without interrupting. He was a Nigerian-American fashion investor who specialized in rare couture acquisitions. Zariah had interned under him during her final year at university, learning how to authenticate pieces, assess value, understand the intersection of art and commerce. He told her once that she had an eye most people spent decades trying to develop. That felt like another lifetime. When she finished talking, silence filled the line. Then Adisa laughed, not mocking, amazed. So she invited you to perform your own humiliation? Yes. And you said yes. I did. More silence. Zariah could hear him thinking. She almost hung up. This was foolish, desperate. She was about to apologize when he spoke again. Let's remind them who you are. Her breath caught. I have a piece, one of one, hand-set pink diamonds on raw silk, insured at $2.3 million. It's been in climate-controlled storage for 3 years waiting for the right moment. Zariah's hands went cold. Adisa, I can't. You're not buying it. You're borrowing it. One night, full security transport, professional styling team, the whole experience. Why would you? Because I'm tired of watching brilliant people apologize for surviving hard seasons. Because that woman invited you as entertainment, and you deserve to walk in as the whole damn exhibit. Because talent doesn't expire just because life knocked you down. Tears burned behind Zariah's eyes. I can't afford. This isn't about money. This is about memory, about showing your son that his mother doesn't stay buried. Consider it an investment in futures I actually believe in. She wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself from hoping, from believing she could be that woman again. But Khalil's face flashed in her mind, the way he'd watched her come home every night in that gray uniform, the way he'd started saying yes ma'am and no sir, like he was preparing to be invisible too. Okay, she whispered. Adisa's smile traveled through the phone. Good. I'll send details tomorrow. And Zariah, when you walk into that room, don't think about her. Think about the girl who wrote essays that made professors rethink entire exhibitions. That's who's showing up. The call ended. Zariah sat in her car, hands shaking, heart racing. The dress wasn't just fabric. It was memory stitched in silk. The gown arrived in a temperature-controlled case with 2 armed guards.
Zariah stood in the hotel suite Adisa had arranged, watching professionals unpack something she'd only seen in museum catalogs. The silk unfolded like liquid sunset. Pink diamonds caught the afternoon light and threw rainbows across white walls. A woman named Keisha, head of the styling team, circled her slowly, measuring with her eyes before touching a single tool. "We're not hiding anything," Keisha said. "We're revealing what's already there." The transformation took 4 hours. Hair pulled back sleek and severe, not a single strand out of place. Edges laid sharp enough to cut. The kind of precision that said money, taste, power. No curls to soften her, no waves to make her approachable. Pure intention. Makeup minimal. Foundation that matched her skin exactly. Highlight on cheekbones that could catch light from across a room. Lips lined in deep burgundy, eyes lined dark. The shoes came next, custom heels in champagne silk. Zariah slipped them on and her posture changed immediately. Spine straightened, shoulders rolled back, chin lifted. Then the dress. Keisha and 2 assistants guided it over her head carefully, reverently, like dressing a sculpture. The silk settled against her skin cool and weightless. The bodice fit like it had been sewn onto her body. Diamonds traced her collarbone, her waist, the edge of every seam. When they fastened the final clasp, Zariah couldn't breathe. Keisha stepped back, smiled. "Look." The mirror showed someone Zariah had forgotten existed. Not the house manager, not the woman who scrubbed floors, not the ghost hiding in a basement. This was the curatorial fellow, the scholar, the woman her father had raised to walk into any room without apology. On her wrist, one piece of her own, a thin gold bracelet her father had given her the day she got her university acceptance letter. Simple, worn, perfect. "You ready?" Keisha asked. Zariah tested a step, then another. The dress moved with her like water, like breath, like it had been waiting for her all along. She thought about Samira's smile when she'd issued the invitation, thought about the whispered warning, thought about every time she'd been made small. Her voice came out steady, sure, hers. "Yes." Adisa called as they were leaving. His voice was warm through the speaker. "Remember something for me tonight," he said. "You're not crashing their party, you're reminding them what they've been looking at without seeing. Walk in there like you own the memory of every museum you ever studied in." The car arrived at 7:45, black, anonymous, professional. Zariah slid into the back seat, careful with the dress. Keisha handed her a small clutch. Inside, 3 business cards already printed with her name and a new title Adisa had arranged, Independent Art Acquisition Consultant. The next time Samira saw her, it wouldn't be in uniform.
The mansion looked like it was on fire with light. Zariah's car joined a line of vehicles that cost more than most mortgages. Bentleys, Maseratis, Teslas, a Rolls-Royce that probably had someone's name engraved on the steering wheel. Security personnel in black suits checked names against tablets, faces against photos. Imported lanterns lined the circular driveway, casting amber light across manicured hedges shaped like geometric art. The fountain in the center courtyard shot water 30 feet high, illuminated from below in shifting colors. Through the windows she could see bodies moving, glittering, laughing, performing wealth for each other. Her car stopped at the entrance. The valet opened her door. For 3 seconds, Zariah didn't move. Her heart hammered, her hands were ice. Every instinct screamed to close the door and leave. Then she thought about Khalil asleep in a basement bedroom, about the gray uniform hanging in her locker, about Samira's voice saying, "Don't embarrass yourself." She stepped out.
Her heel touched pavement first, champagne silk catching light. Then the dress unfolded as she stood, raw silk cascading like a waterfall. Then the diamonds. Every single stone caught every single camera flash from guests taking photos of arrivals. Then her face. The conversation at the entrance stopped mid-sentence. A woman in emerald green froze, champagne flute halfway to her lips. A man in a tailored tuxedo turned fully around. The valet straightened his spine like he'd been shocked. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" Another voice, louder, "She looks like she walked out of a magazine." The reaction spread like ripples in water. Heads turned, phones lifted, whispers multiplied and grew. Zoraya walked forward, each step measured, confident, the kind of walk that came from years of presenting in lecture halls, from defending thesis arguments in front of panels, from knowing your work was solid even when others doubted. Security waved her through without checking the list. Inside, the ballroom was excessive. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars, ice sculptures shaped like swans, champagne towers built 4 feet high, a string quartet on a raised platform, servers in crisp white carrying trays of food most guests wouldn't eat. Samira stood near the center of the room, surrounded by her usual circle. She was mid-laugh, head thrown back, performing joy for her audience. Then someone touched her shoulder, pointed toward the entrance. Samira turned. Her smile didn't just fade, it cracked. Her eyes went wide. Her champagne glass tilted in her hand, liquid sloshing against the rim. For one perfect second, every polished layer stripped away and pure shock replaced it. Because Zoraya didn't look like staff. She looked like legacy. The room shifted. Conversations paused. The string quartet seemed quieter. Everyone turned to see what had pulled Samira al-Nouri's attention so completely. Zoraya met her eyes across 30 feet of marble floor. Didn't smile, didn't wave, just held her gaze. Samira's jaw tightened. Her hand clenched around her glass. She said something sharp to the woman beside her, then started walking. Her heels clicked against marble, sharp, fast, angry. The entire ballroom leaned in to watch. Samira walked toward her, and the room held its breath.
Samira stopped 3 feet away, close enough to whisper, far enough to maintain appearances. "What is this?" Her voice was tight, controlled, furious. Zoraya's posture didn't change, shoulders back, chin level, calm. "Your invitation," she said quietly. "I didn't want to embarrass you." Samira's eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to respond, but a voice cut through the tension. "Excuse me." A man in an immaculate navy suit approached, eyes locked on Zoraya's dress. He was older, silver-haired, the kind of presence that made rooms quiet. "That's a Chimamanda original, isn't it?" Several guests nearby turned, interested, curious. Zoraya nodded once. The man stepped closer, examining the craftsmanship. "The hand-set pink diamond collection. I thought all of those pieces were in private collections or museums." He looked at her directly. "This is the Sao Paulo piece, insured at what, 2.3 million?" The number landed like a bomb. Audible gasps rippled through the crowd, phones lifted higher, guests pushed closer to see. $2 million. Samira's face drained of color. The man extended his hand. "Marcus Whitfield, I acquire for private collections. This is extraordinary." "Zoraya Coleman," she said, shaking his hand firmly. Samira recovered fast. She forced a laugh, bright and brittle. "Everyone, this is our dear Zoraya. She manages our household. We're so fortunate to have her. We really do treat our staff like family." The condescension was thick enough to choke on. Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Zoraya turned to face Samira fully. The room pressed closer. "You invited elegance," Zoraya said, voice steady and clear. I simply answered. The words hung in the air. Someone laughed, not mockery, appreciation. Then another person, then scattered applause that grew louder. Samira's smile turned to stone. Her hands trembled. She tried to speak, but nothing came out right. Marcus was still watching Zariah. Coleman. That name sounds familiar. Did you write for the Journal of Contemporary African Art a few years back? Every molecule in the room changed. Zariah's breath caught. I did. I thought so. Your essay on textile narratives in post-colonial art was remarkable. What are you doing now? The question was simple. The answer was complicated. But Samira was watching, and the room was listening. Zariah met Marcus's eyes. I took a detour, but I'm finding my way back. The honesty hit harder than any performance could have. Marcus pulled a card from his jacket. We should talk. I'm expanding my consulting team. Your eye is exactly what we need. He handed her the card. She took it. Samira made a small sound, almost a whimper. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Zariah was supposed to be uncomfortable, out of place, a cautionary tale about knowing your limits. Instead, she was being recruited. But then someone across the room said her name, loud enough to carry.
Zariah Coleman? A woman in a stunning red gown pushed through the crowd. She was younger, energetic, holding a phone like she'd just Googled something. You're the Zariah Coleman who published that analysis on Kehinde Wiley's compositional techniques? More heads turned. Zariah nodded slowly. I used that essay in my graduate thesis, the woman continued, excited now. It completely changed how I understood spatial politics in portraiture. What are you working on now? A man in glasses joined them. Wait, the curatorial fellow from Howard? I heard you were brilliant. Where did you end up? The questions came faster. More people recognized her name, remembered her work, pulled up articles on their phones and showed them to others. A venture philanthropist named David Chan approached, smiling. I've been following your work since 2019. That piece you wrote on art as resistance changed my entire acquisition strategy. I thought you'd disappeared. Life happened, Zariah said simply. I understand. His voice was kind, genuine. But if you're consulting now, I'd love to talk. I'm building a collection focused on contemporary Black artists, and I need someone who understands the cultural context, not just the market value. He handed her his card. Then another consultant approached, then a gallery owner. Within 10 minutes, Zariah had 5 business cards in her clutch, 5 people who saw her as the scholar, not the help. The crowd around her grew. Questions multiplied. Someone started clapping. One person, then 2, then the entire section of the room. Applause spread like wildfire, not for the dress, for the recognition, for watching someone be seen clearly after years of being looked past. Zariah's throat tightened. She wasn't used to this anymore, being visible, being valued. Across the room, Samira stood frozen. Her circle had abandoned her to join the crowd around Zariah. Her champagne glass hung loose in her hand. Her carefully constructed evening had collapsed. She tried to step forward, to say something, to reclaim control. But her voice cracked. Nobody was listening. Marcus touched Zariah's elbow gently. There's someone I want you to meet. Museum director. She's been looking for an advisory consultant. As Zariah turned to follow him, she caught Samira's eye one last time. The woman looked smaller somehow, like the room had redistributed its attention and left her standing in a shadow she'd created herself. Zariah didn't gloat, didn't smile triumphantly, didn't perform her victory. She simply turned away, because she hadn't come for revenge. She'd come for something bigger.
The rest of the evening blurred into conversations about art, opportunities, and forgotten dreams waking up. Zariah talked about curatorial ethics with a museum board member, discussed acquisition strategies with private collectors, laughed with people who remembered her work and wanted to know what came next. Around 11, she stepped outside onto the terrace. The Potomac glittered below, reflecting city lights like scattered diamonds. Marcus found her there. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Just processing." "You know what tonight was really about?" He leaned against the railing. "It wasn't about proving anything to her. It was about you remembering you never stopped being who you were. You just forgot for a while."
We all do when life hits hard enough. Zariah looked down at the bracelet on her wrist, her father's gift. He used to tell me that my lowest season wasn't my final chapter, she said quietly. I'm starting to believe him again. Marcus smiled. Good, because the art world needs people who understand that culture isn't decoration, it's documentation, it's resistance, it's memory, and you understand that in your bones. He handed her one more card. Call me Monday. Let's talk about what coming back looks like. She took it, held it, let herself feel the weight of possibility. Inside, the party continued, but Zariah was done performing. She left the same way she'd entered, alone, certain, unforgettable. 6 months later, Zariah would co-curate a private collection exhibit in Washington, D.C., focused on contemporary African diasporic artists. Her name would appear in the program not as staff, but as lead consultant. Khalil would stand beside her at the opening, wearing a suit Adisa bought him, watching his mother command a room the way she was always meant to. And Samira? She'd send an email, brief, professional, asking if Zariah would consider consulting on an art acquisition for the Al-Nouri estate. Zariah would decline, politely, because some rooms you leave behind not out of anger, but because you've outgrown them. Here's what she learned that night, what she wants every person watching this to understand. Your worst season doesn't define your worth. The world will try to label you by your lowest point, by your survival job, by the detour you had to take when everything fell apart. But money can decorate a room, only character fills it. People who need to diminish others to feel significant will always find a target. Let them. Your job isn't to shrink so they feel bigger. Your job is to remember who you are when the performance ends. And if you're watching this right now, ask yourself something. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever walked into a room where someone wanted you to fail? Have you ever been invited somewhere as a joke, only to show them exactly who you've always been? Drop your story in the comments. Share where you're watching from. Tell us about your comeback, your detour, your moment of walking in unforgettable. Because someone needs to hear it. Someone is in their basement season right now, forgetting their own face in the mirror. Your story might be the reminder they need. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications, because we're bringing you stories every week that don't just entertain, they elevate. Stories about people who refused to stay buried, who turned humiliation into fuel, who walked through closed doors wearing their truth like armor. Share this video with someone who needs to remember their power. Comment below and inspire others with your own journey. Because here's the truth Zariah learned that night, and the truth that sets all of us free. You are not your detour. You are your comeback. And the world has no idea what you're about to walk in wearing.